Nigeria has experienced an oscillatory movement in manufacturing output growth over the years. This is because the performance of the sector largely depends on crude oil price movement and forex availability. Now, the contribution of the manufacturing sector to the nation's gross domestic product has been hovering around the 9% mark, which is quite below the double-digit benchmark for attaining the developed industrialization status. My guest talks about the journey of manufacturing in Nigeria and how they have had to deal with the myriad of challenges, including multiple taxes through the successive governments. Newsnight speaks with Mr. Segun Ajayi-Kadri, Director General of the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, who talks to us about the impact of these challenges on the sector. Mr. Kadri, thank you for joining us on Newsnight.
Thank you very much for having me.
Industrialization in Nigeria is a conversation that has been for as long as I can remember. But the matter of employment and unemployment and underemployment has again come to the fore in the last 8 years or thereabout because the numbers have continued to increase. Why do we have such a high rate of unemployment with all of the industries we have in Nigeria? Let's start off from there.
Yes. Okay. Employment to a manufacturer is actually a function of the production process. A manufacturer will only employ if his operations requires labor with set skills that will encourage his production and, very importantly, productivity. Very importantly, profitability. So, for a manufacturer not to employ is to say that he doesn't have any reason to employ. What it means is that he's not expanding his production process, he's not growing volume, he's not profitable, there are no initiatives or there is no incentive to go into other areas of manufacturing. So the fact that manufacturing performance has remained low, the fact that capacity utilization in the last 10 years has remained flat at anywhere between 50 to 52, 53%. The fact that value addition has become a major and Herculean tax for the average manufacturer means that the appetite to employ will not be there. It means that it will not be able to afford itself even the minimum requirements to have an efficient and effective process. So the flat rate of employment in manufacturing there's a correlation between that and the performance and the status of manufacturing in Nigeria.
Let me just hold you there. You call it a flat rate of employment in the sense that it's just been that way?
Yes.
But the companies are not folding up.
Yes.
And you tell me the fact that they're not employing means they're not profiting.
Yes.
But they're not folding up.
Yes, okay, so for a manufacturer, he has invested heavily in machines, in building, and more importantly, in brand presence. So most manufacturers are either operating at very low margins or are not actually making profit. But to fold up and shut down, he will end up in debts. He will not be able to engage in activities that will allow it to sustain its brands in the market. And generally, as an investor, you wouldn't want to fail. So I think somewhere between these three issues are what has maintained a manufacturer in business. Because if you look at the books of manufacturers, even the profit that is declared you will see that they all go up in terms of restocking, in terms of repaying their loans, and in terms of payment of staff and the rest of it. So for a manufacturing company, even if it's not folding up, it doesn't mean that is doing exceedingly well.
You know, this conversation again, you went towards this direction to say the status of the manufacturing industry is directly correlated to the status of the Nigerian economy. That's what you said.
Yeah.
Why did you put it that way?
Okay, so manufacturing is central to any economy.
True.
There's no economy in the world that is termed advanced or developed that does not have a virile manufacturing sector. Because manufacturing, I've often said, is a strategic choice that countries make for their resilience, for their security, and for good international presence. What COVID-19 has taught us is that as a nation, if you do not have a manufacturing sector that can provide for the needs of the people, you will be at the mercy of other countries of the world to survive in situations of dire situations around the world. The vaccine nationalism has shown the world that whenever you have an epidemic, for instance, that nations that are prepared are the ones that will survive or that would have greater measure of resilience. And what are vaccines? They are products that are manufactured in pharmaceutical companies. So manufacturing is synonymous with national security. And so you cannot divorce the status of an economy from its manufacturing space.
Now, the Nigerian space, I mean, from independence, we had the oil boom, but before then we had the agricultural revolution, then we had the oil boom. Then some will say after the oil boom was the industrial age, where we had different manufacturers coming up in this country. So some foreign companies coming to set up manufacturing or, how do you put it now, assembling plants here in country, creating jobs. But you say that the fact that it's been that way is because the Nigerian economy has sort of tabled, so to speak, and then began to go downwards.
Yes.
But is that the accounting for the reason why some of these companies have left and some others are still living?
Yes, you know, the affluence that came with the oil boom, I prefer to call it a lopsided affluence. The one that didn't have trickle-down effect on the whole economy, the one that made us to remain a mono economy without any plan to ensure that it is used to finance the advancement of other sectors and even the promotion of competencies in so many areas that we have what I would call comparative advantage. So that affluence gave the impression that there's a lot of prosperity and there was influx, like you said, of businesses from all over the world. But when you have an environment that does not promote sustainability of investment, investment is very shy. It will fly away, just like birds on a tree when you throw a stone at it. So what has happened is that we have not paid attention to sustaining the investment that have come into the country and even those that were domestically generated. So you now have a scenario where we favor rent seeking, which has come from the oil boom. We have seen a neglect of our backward integration initiatives that ought to tie our industrial sector to sourcing their raw materials locally. We saw a situation where even the oil boom was not deployed to improve infrastructure that is needed to grow the industrial sector. we saw a situation where government was paying less attention to possible revenue that could come from payment of tax from the industrial sector. So we didn't just have a synchronization even of federal government policies, state government policies, to deliberately and intentionally promote the growth of manufacturing at sub-regional levels and at the federal level.
But you see, when you talk about the government, you said we, being the leadership of the nation, did not or failed to see the revenue that could come from tax from the manufacturing sector. And it looks like you and your colleagues took advantage of that, and many were not paying their taxes, just running their industries. I can
assure you that, and it's been confirmed by one of the former chairmen of, a former chairman actually of FRS, that manufacturers are the highest tax-paying segment in the society. And this is because no matter how big a company is, it has one or two gates. So if he doesn't pay his tax, just lock it up, and he will pay up.
But are they paying commensurate to what to the profits they make?
I would rather tell you that manufacturers are overtaxed, because we pay all manners of tax, education tax. We pay. In fact, there was a time in Lagos State that manufacturers were paying graveyard tax. There were about a list of 160 taxes that we pay in some states, in some 90, in some 60. You have all manners of stickers on your car. You pay official, unofficial taxes by federal, state, and local governments. So it is not true that manufacturers are not paying tax. If anything, I think we have complained about being overtaxed. And that's why, though that's not your question, but that's why I think the recent development about setting up a presidential committee on fiscal policy and tax reform is extremely important and should be taken very seriously. And I believe that with the leadership of that committee, we'll be able to achieve a very efficient and effective tax system in Nigeria.
When you talk about government institutions and the leadership, there's been that concern about a follow-through. For instance, I wrote this down. Countries who promote sustainability of investment are the ones who thrive in manufacturing or industrialization. Now, promoting sustainability of investment means there are institutions set in place to manage that sector. In other climes, we've seen where manufacturers, seeing that my industry is here, my raw materials are there, and my market is on that side, the manufacturers will themselves set up a rail line or a transport system that will benefit the community, but also ensure that his raw materials get to him, and from him gets to his market. But that doesn't seem to be the situation in Nigeria. It looks like the manufacturers in Nigeria feel like they're a special breed, and government has to do everything for them. Let's compare the two here.
Okay.
What makes the two different?
I have not come across any economy where a private investor, a manufacturer, is obliged.
Not obliged, so to speak.
Okay, or where a manufacturer actually has on his balance sheet provision of railway systems. I think what has come closest to that is this policy of government that allows a manufacturer to fund infrastructure in areas where it's located and to make the claims in terms of tax breaks. That may be a possibility. But you see, a manufacturer is a manufacturer, and government has responsibility to provide infrastructure. So if what you are saying is that they do it in form of CSR, then CSR should only be done by companies that are making profit. But come to think of it, manufacturers themselves in Nigeria are their own local government, if I may use the word. We provide our own security, we provide our own power, we provide our own water, we provide our own health facilities, and we are responsible for virtually everything that comes our way. So to make them to bear the additional burden of providing things like railway. I mean, during the colonial era, the colonial government deliberately institutionalized the process of shoveling the raw materials to ports where they will be taken out of the country. They designed the railway system to fit that narrative. So what should be expected post-colonial era is for us to identify those centers where we generate our raw materials, link them with where there are industries, and then an avenue for us to either export or distribute domestically. But you cannot have a system that does not have government awareness about what needed to be done to deliberately and intentionally promote this narrative of this scenario. Because in other climes where manufacturing is thriving, they have done exactly that. Mm-hmm. And there are so many lessons that can be learned from that. There are so many recommendations that have been made to government. There are so many initiatives of government that have been driven to achieve that purpose. But there's just this thing that does not allow it to happen in terms of implementation. And even when you commence implementation, monitoring and sustaining such processes has become a challenge.
The conversation about providing infrastructure, not necessarily that they are obliged to do it, but it's like you get it back in the form of tax rebates. I mean, the rail lines in the U.S. were mostly started by industrialists who were ensuring to get the products they needed and their products to the market. That's what I didn't want to call the country. But in Nigeria, for instance, we have a new government in place. And certain things have been put up. For instance, in one of his broadcasts, the government is planning to spend 75 billion naira between 2023 and March 2024. 75 billion. That's a lot of money. And 75 enterprises are to access 1 billion each. I'm coming. You're smiling. It looks like something that's it really pleased you. But that's in the face of a cry out, an alarm that was raised by your organization about the size and tenor of loans given to industrialists and manufacturers, and then the difficulty in even accessing this finance. So you cried out in this to raise alarm. The tenure is too long, and then the size is too small, and the interest rate is way up there. And then to even access the one that's available, it's almost impossible. Now the president, Bola Tinubu, has come out to say 75 enterprises, access 75 billion. Did that please you?
Okay, so we need to situate it within the context of President Tinubu's approach to governance since he became president. I think he has done quite a number of things differently. And
this was based on an executive order?
Yes.
4, actually.
And so we have seen a definite direction in terms of his policy pronouncements. And even though the structures that will support such pronouncements are just emerging, we believe that it is the right thing to do.
So the industrialists in Nigeria are happy?
The industrialists in Nigeria are hopeful. They are encouraged by the steps that have been taken. I mean, he provided immediate relief in terms of what will have become an excise crisis. He resolved that with the executive orders that you mentioned. And then to cap it all, he's addressing one of the major challenges that we have, which is financing manufacturing. And when you said 75 billion is a lot of money, I will tell you that I have 2,500 members plus. And more than 1,500 will need finance. So if you take 75 of them and give them 1 billion, you will have done a lot, but you will not have done everything. And so the reaction to that is that Mr. President has made a fantastic start. For me, what it means is that he appreciates where the problem is. And he knows that it is directly putting money in the hands of manufacturers at rates that are reasonable, 9%, with reasonable repayment period. That is the direction to go. There are agencies of government, there are institutions of government that need to be able to support this narrative. And we believe that 8 months out of 4 years is a short period, that it will be replicated and institutionalized. We have already advised, for instance, that this 75 billion should be, if you ask us, should be given to Bank of Industry that has the capacity and the structure to be able to effectively deploy the loans and ensure that the monies come back and that they are judiciously used. What just needs to be provided is there has to be a governance process that will allow it to be targeted at specific sectors that will have trickle-down effect and will fit into the objective of government. I'm sure that Mr. President will be well pleased if those loans are given to industries that, for instance, have backward integration plan, those ones that have capacity to generate, by the injection of these funds, more jobs, those ones that will have the capacity and the tendency to export their products, those ones that are going to pay tax as well on the fruits that have emerged from this investment. So there has to be a prioritization so that government can use it as a showcase of what is possible when you intentionally support manufacturing. So what the president has done is to, I believe, to test the waters with this policy and to see how the sector will react to it. So if you say manufacturers are happy about it, yes, we are, not because it's going to solve all the problems, not because finance is the only problem that we have, but because it is one of those areas that government could directly deploy its resources. The government is more or less putting money where its mouth is, because that is not charity. They are going to pay back. Apart from that, they are going to employ more people, they are going to pay tax, and they are going to generally improve our national output. The contribution of manufacturing to the GDP should, for God's sake, move beyond the normal 8, 9, 10%. In some other countries, they are doing 25, 30, 40%. And that is needed for national growth. So I think the president has just has done the right thing. It's not only the 75 billion naira to 75 companies. There's also the 125 billion for small-scale industries. Yeah. We believe that they should be judiciously, effectively dispensed, and that, very importantly, there could be partnership with MAN, for instance, because we are able to tell you where these manufacturers are. We know those manufacturers that are distressed because of finance. We know those ones that have suffered downturn because they are not able to retool. Those ones that are doing backward integration but are stuck for various reasons, and that is just one part. Then there is also the need for government to ensure that there are supportive measures. It's not only giving somebody money. We even have many manufacturers that the challenge they have is not finance, but there are so many other things. And that even when they get this money, other issues have to play out to ensure that they fully maximize the use and that there's a return on it for Nigerians. I mean, don't forget that this is the country's money.
Talking about industries and what the status is in Nigeria, I grew up knowing certain brands that have vanished. Some of them are homegrown brands. There are some that have completely vanished and nobody knows where they are. Is it all about the government? Is the government to blame for all the disappearances that are happening?
Okay, I think it's usually a combination of so many factors. And the reason why government is generally fingered in this is that there are factors that government could have prevented. You see, sometimes you may not directly cause a thing to happen, but it will happen anyway if you don't do anything to prevent it. I was an executive secretary in Ikeja branch And I never bought any tire that was more than 1 month old. Immediately they are manufactured, because Dunlop is just on Obakran. I will normally go to a shop that is very close and buy. And then government policy came up without consultations, lowered the duty on imported tires. The tires flooded the country. The company closed shop. More recently, and I think you mentioned it, Nigerians are not going to be seeing Omo produced in Nigeria anymore. GlaxoSmithKline closed shop only recently. And if you watch closely at the reasons they have adduced for closing up, there are things that government can prevent. Nigeria was not, was no longer the country they invested in. Over the years, the confidence in the economy has been largely eroded. Many of them, particularly in recent times, have had their profit that they have the legitimate right to repatriate stock. Many of them suffered unprecedented consumer apathy for their products. We had a Naira transition program that was badly managed, and then is still actually affecting so many companies now who are yet to recover. And all of these are coming on the heels of things that are also, even in some instances, beyond the control of the government. We had the COVID-19 pandemic, we had the Russian-Ukraine war. But why are other countries able to manage this crisis better? Why did we not respond with domestic policies that will assuage the negative trends that has ripple effect over all other areas and is decimating the manufacturing industries that we have? So, it's not difficult for us to see why these companies are either closing shop or are departing Nigeria, and why many more would go if government is not intentional about resolving the issues. And that's why this new government has a golden opportunity to reverse the trend. Like I said, so far, the steps that have been taken demonstrates factual understanding of the situation, consultations with relevant stakeholders, and deliberate implementation, follow-up, monitoring of government policies will ensure that we at least stop this bleeding, stop this departure of community. Then we now look at the larger issues of having a conversation that will allow us to have sustainable plan for industrialization in Nigeria. It will shock you to know that as we speak now, Nigeria does not have an industrial policy, a policy that guides its trajectory as far as industrialization is concerned, the one that unites all ministry, departments, and agencies of government and others relevant stakeholders to be focused on one cause, the one that directs our foreign policy, the one that directs our fiscal and monetary policies, to be intentional about supporting one agenda. So that is important for a country that is the biggest economy in Africa and has the highest chance of prosperity in this continent.
Yes, there are challenges they have to deal with, but the bulk of the challenges they've had to deal with have had to be paid for by the citizens, the consumer. So is the consumer taken into cognizance in the planning of the industrialists?
Yes, I think when the industrial sector prospers, the people benefit.
Oh.
Because we are going to, for instance, if we improve domestic production of goods that are normally imported, the prices should go down. So we are currently witnessing unprecedented consumer apathy. Our warehouses are full, and that's for those who are even able to produce. And many industries are investing in warehouses quite a number of our members have even said that their products expire in warehouses. So if you have an environment that is conducive for manufacturing, the chances are higher that you have domestic products that have more competitive prices than those that are imported. You will also be able to see greater number of employment that will put money directly into people's hands. When a lot of people are talking about minimum wage, it doesn't apply to an average manufacturer because we pay way above the minimum wage. So in terms of putting money in the hands of the citizen, the manufacturing sector can be relied upon to do that. We have even said that the palliatives that government is going to give should not be the ones that just gives nominal relief. If we use it to expand the manufacturing process, you are going to generate jobs across the value chain, even for somebody that is not employed in that industry alone, in that industry in particular. You see them as traders, you see them as wholesale operators, you see them as in the logistics in terms of supplying the goods, moving them around, in terms of providing packaging, in terms of online trading, so many trickle-down effects that you are going to have. It is better to put monies in those places, and the overall well-being of the people will be guaranteed. You can imagine Dangote Industries, for instance, having about more than 8,000 trucks. And if one truck is employing 3 persons, do the maths. How many industries? And that's just for transportation. I'm not mentioning the Dangote cement, the refinery that is coming on, and quite a number of other manufacturers that are gainfully employing Nigerians. So it is to improve productivity that will allow people to get jobs, live better life, and reduce the tension that we are having in the land.
As we begin to wind down, this ball of a nation, I'll use, let me describe it as a ball with different components and all of that, the economy, the academia, and all coming together to ensure sustainability, to ensure growth, to ensure that there's a future for the nation. In the midst of all of that, we do know that there are foreign investors that are coming into the industrial sector and setting up industries. They appear to be thriving more than the Nigeria-owned or homegrown industrialists. I mean, there are companies in Lagos, for instance, that employ a lot of Nigerians. Conditions may not be as fantastic as they should be, but they seem to be coming up more, and we're seeing more of the Nigerian industries stepping backwards, so to speak, or selling out. One would wonder, how about a merger of some of these companies? What is that being considered? Does your association encourage, look, Neota, you and Kadri, if you've seen that you're on your own, you're not going far, you could come together and merge and the company starts? Because that's what seemed to have strengthened some other industries around the world.
Okay, so there are different aspects to this matter. When you say foreign-owned businesses are doing better,
appear to be
doing better. Okay, from afar, that assumption could be permitted, but there are not so many of them. Like I told you, we have more than 2,500 members. And those that are
foreign-owned, are they part of MAN as well?
Yes, they are part of, yes, Unilever, Cadbury, PZ, Nigerian Breweries, many of them. There's hardly any multinational in Nigeria that is not a member of MAN. And so, but let us even, without conceding, let us try to examine it. The fact is that they have access to, for instance, loan facilities at far less than, in fact, in the region of 1% to 5%. Their home countries will ensure that they are heavily supported in many respects. We are very happy with that because It also allows them to support auxiliary industries or industries that supply them some of their raw materials locally. But the truth be told, we all operate in an environment that is not conducive. So if they have higher capacity to deal with the challenges, they will normally prosper more. But we have indigenous companies that are also resilient. Make no mistake about it. Any manufacturing industry in Nigeria that is thriving, making profit or something, is just because it has a higher capacity to overcome the challenges. I mean, if you look at the landscape of manufacturing, you did say that a long time ago you are used to seeing brands that are no longer there. New ones are emerging, but you will look at what is the rate of growth that comes to that sector. Why is it that manufacturing contribution to GDP has not risen above the level it is at today? Why is it that when you compare how those multinationals you mentioned in Nigeria are performing, when you compare them with those that are in other countries, why are they, for instance, reducing their portfolios in Nigeria and boosting it in other areas? I think it has to do with the general environment in which they operate. And so you will need to, rather than look at pockets of cases, to take a holistic view as to what is negatively or positively affecting the fortunes of people who have agreed to do manufacturing in Nigeria.
Finally, manufacturing is a strategic choice of countries. Your words.
Yes.
Talk to Nigeria about that. Talk to the world about it.
So,
what should be done.
Okay.
Or maybe before we even go there, let's go back a bit and look at the challenges that the industrial sector has had to deal with. Infrastructure, power, roads, and all of that. Is there hope? Is there a possibility that the industrialists could come together and say, government, we want to do, especially now that power, for instance, has left the concurrent list. You could walk up to state government as a team and say, okay, we want to do this. Give us room, and then this is what it's going to cost us, this is what we're thinking we'll take as a rebate. We want to fix the roads and all of that. Is that being considered, and how though?
Yes, I mean, Nigeria is a very great country. No matter what we have gone through, no matter what lies ahead, Nigeria still has the capacity to be one of the greatest nations on earth. There's no way, and I can say this, there's no way that manufacturing will not thrive in Nigeria. I think it's just a matter of the right environment. And so the right environment can be created. We are too blessed as a nation not to develop. We have too many talented people. We have too many resilient people. We have too much intelligence as a country not to develop. I mean, you need to get close to manufacturers, particularly the small-scale industries. In some other climes, if they go through what we are going through, they will have closed up long time ago. So I believe that what has kept us alive is just the belief in this country that we are going to survive. So, as a matter of fact, any government in Nigeria has lucky people. I mean, it's a lucky government because they have all that it takes to galvanize the people to follow up their policies, take advantage of it, run with it, and succeed with it. So I think that to answer your question directly, yes, I think that there is hope. There's a lot of challenge, but those challenges can be overcome. And I can assure you that all that government needs to do have been well documented. We have the Nigeria Industrial Revolution plan. That has clearly spelled out how within a short period of time we can advance, but this has been policy of government. It has largely not been implemented.
So, sorry. Now that you bring this up, Nigeria Industrial Revolution Plan. But earlier you said Nigeria does not have a national industrial policy.
Exactly.
What's the difference between the two?
Good. So an industrial policy is to set a general idea about how the country will behave towards this sector. So you unite every aspect of our life. So if anybody wants to come and invest in Nigeria, the first thing you look at, is it recognized in this policy? If Nigeria is going to enter into any relationship, any form of agreement with any other country, is it within the framework of what we can do? All the support that Nigeria is giving in ECOWAS, in Africa, does it support our agenda? Are we going to be, look, for all that we did in Sierra Leone and I think Liberia, we didn't receive reimbursement from ECOWAS. What is Nigeria getting back? If I were president, I will ensure that whatever I do, I have something in return. So historically, we have not been guided, and that's what policy is about. Now, the plan, to answer your question directly, specifically targeted 5 sectors, gave guidelines as to how we can maximize our comparative and competitive advantage, and created the how you could generate the momentum that will drive those sectors. What needed to be done by different parts of government. This, I must tell you, was a follow-up to the plan that Nigeria gave to the then minister. And we called it the Blueprint for the Accelerated Development of Manufacturing in Nigeria. So it was actually a succeeding document that gave it a national outlook. And the Blueprint 2.0, for instance, is out, which has built on what we have achieved from the first one, taking into cognizance the Nigeria Industrial Revolution Plan and the ARGP that followed, to encapsulate what we need to do. All those ones put together do not make a policy. They only give guidelines on how to achieve specific objectives. So the industrial policy that we are looking forward to is the one that is all-encompassing and gives policy direction for government and even all will-be investors and existing investors in Nigeria, as far as that sector is concerned.
So making that strategic choice now, at what point would it be too late for Nigeria to make that choice?
It's never too late to do the right thing. And I think that once you make that strategic choice, you need to do everything that a government can do to ensure that you do not deviate from it, and that every other thing that runs contrary to that choice is just taken away. Mm-hmm. You must intentionally engage your energies, your productive capacity, your human capital, your relationship capital, because relationship to that, you need to be able to focus on making it happen and to reject every other thing that does not favor that narrative. Countries that are known to have developed, why is America engaging in wars all around the country? Sometimes it is all around the world. Sometimes it is to protect their strategic interests, which has to do with market penetration. So you need to be able to rally around all your capacities to support that choice when it is made. If we have made that choice, it will not be possible for you to see continuous decimation of manufacturing in this country.
What would you call the low-hanging fruits that can be taken now to see things change? Yes, we've heard the promises made by the president. 125 small-scale industry, small and medium scale, 75 big enterprises. But the low-hanging fruits that can be done. He has started, you said that. Yes. 4 executive orders, but there are those who argue 4 executive orders, there's no legal backing, so to speak. He has made the others, so what next? But what would you call the low-hanging fruits that can be plucked?
There are quite a number of them. He has picked some. And what still remains, for instance, is the situation at the ports. It's still a lot easier for you now to, maybe let's even look at it in terms of cost. It costs about the same thing to bring a 40-foot container from Singapore to Nigeria than to take it from Apapa to Agbara. That needs to be resolved. The bottleneck, and I think it's a human factor, has to be removed at the ports. We also have an impending increase in the price of in the tariff on electricity, the cost of electricity. The economy cannot take it at this time. So I think that too has to be addressed. We also need to ensure that industries who import their raw materials and pay raw materials, spares, and machines, and pay because it's calculated with the exchange rate. We need to ensure that it is not calculated at the floated rate, because that is the way you can deal with inflation. Because if you produce with that, in fact, there was a company that imported its raw materials and was waiting to clear it. When he got the bill that he's going to pay, he did his calculation and discovered that he would not make the profit he was looking forward to making. Was lower than the duty he will have to pay on it. So I think that has to be addressed. We also have members that have converted their process to receive gas in order to save costs from electricity. This gas that is sold to them continues to be denominated in dollars. This is a domestic product. Those are low-hanging fruits that governments can immediately use. We also have the issue of multiplicity of taxes and levies, that if the federal, state, and local government would just agree that that should be taken out, it will lead to industries being able to breathe, if I may use that phrase, because I think that is fairly popular now. So it will give some immediate relief. There are so many low-hanging fruits. The regulatory agencies that have literally abandoned their responsibility of regulating their industries and fully turned to revenue generation agencies should actually stop. There is need for you to focus. There is need to allow the manufacturer to even focus on his business, because there are too many distractions. So, those are things that does not require any legislation. It does not require any, it only requires very little budgetary or no budgetary allocation. It is just something that government can intentionally do and quickly do.
Manufacturers having to calculate the cost of paying for their raw materials at the floated rate. One begins to wonder, do we have two different rates now in Nigeria?
No.
I thought with the floating of the Naira and the harmonization of the different exchange rates, things would be a lot easier for the manufacturers.
Okay, yes. But with the floating of the Naira rate, the consequence is that the rate will go up. So it means you need more Naira to be able to import your raw materials. So for us, it's more important than so many other sectors. So when you bring in those raw materials at rates that are very high, it means that when you produce with those raw materials, the consumer will not buy because the price is too high. And so what we are saying is that you need to put your money where your mouth is. The government can intentionally give a respite for production inputs, raw materials, machines, and spares. And you can easily derive this. There's no way you can hide it. So, and choose for them a specific figure that will not allow them to go to their production floors and then hit the market with products that are more expensive and beyond the purchasing ability of the average Nigerian. That is what we are saying. We are not calling in any way for a dual exchange rate. As a matter of fact, man is a chief advocate of the unification of the rates. And we wouldn't be caught asking for any other thing. No. Not at all.
Thank you so much, Mr. Kennedy.
Yes.
Thank
It's
you.
a pleasure. Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you. That's Newsnight. Thank you for being a part of the show. We would like to get your perspective about the focus of the conversation, the challenges of industrialization in Nigeria. Our handles are showing on your screen. Thank you once again. I'm Nelta Igbe. Bye-bye.